Hey, welcome to 1500ESPN.com. I'm Derek Wetmore. This is Vikings analyst Andrew Krammer. We're out here in Mankato at Vikings training camp. Wanted to put together a quick video explaining some of the rule changes for this year. Andrew, you had a chance to talk to a group of people to explain this to you yesterday. First, what's the rule change and what's going to be the impact of this upcoming NFL season?
Yeah, there are a few of them. Obviously, one of them, they're all focused around player safety, but one of the main changes is now in the trenches, in that offensive and defensive line, you're not going to see hand checking to the face. Before, a lot of those checks were allowed. It just was prolonged grabbing, wasn't. So now those 5 and 10 yard variety penalties will be thrown around a lot more for linemen who are going at somebody's face just with their hand right away in the initial contact. You see that a lot in the NFL, actually, more so than you would think. And so now teams are trying to curb the way they practice, just trying to be able to not do those kind of things. Actually, Brandon Fusco, the Vikings starting right guard, was an example in the video shown to all teams around the league. Obviously, there are more players involved, but Fusco was the only Viking there, shown kind of what not to do. He kind of had a play where he checked Ndamukong Suh last year kind of in the face, just like that. And that was a 10-yard variety that will be now this year. So moving forward, though, the NFL is going to experiment with moving the extra point back to the 15-yard line. Kickers really aren't that fond of that. Blair Walsh told me he thinks they're trying to fix something that's not really broken. But obviously he says, though, that he doesn't think the NFL wants games lost by extra points. However, the reason they're moving it back is so they're less accurate. So those games could be affected, especially as they play 13 of 16 games outdoors next year. You know, obviously 8 being at TCF Bank Stadium. So the NFL is going to experiment with that this preseason. They might institute that throughout the whole year. We'll see. However, moving forward, they're going to also focus on defensive contact, which if you've watched Mike Zimmer's defenses in the past, you know that Cincinnati Bengals were very physical defense, especially from the defensive backs. So now the NFL is going to watch more of jersey grabbing by receivers, more so just physical contact after the 5 yard. Obviously, it's allowed when the quarterback moves out of the pocket, but now the refs are going to try and focus more on not letting the defensive players stop receivers within those 5 yards. So you can kind of get a hint that they're trying to lean more toward offense with that. Defensive players get kind of sick of those rules. However, now offensive receivers cannot push off at the top of routes. That's going to be another point of emphasis for refs. Obviously, those hook routes that you see, kind of receivers kind of just shove the defensive back and then kind of turn around to the quarterback. That's not going to be allowed. Maybe it wasn't allowed already, but it's going to be more of a point of emphasis to stop this year. A big rule change, though, is just in terms of communication on the field. You heard a lot about verbal abuse being thrown around, specifically with refs to players, players to refs, player to player. That's all going to be checked more. They're going to see a lot more unsportsmanlike penalties being thrown around for using certain vile words, whether it's the N-word or certain cuss words. And refs, we huddled around with a few refs who gave us kind of a rundown of these rules earlier in the preseason. And they kind of told us that it's going to be really difficult to tell whether or not these players are actually friends or trying to kill each other, because some of those words can be endearing terms or just vile words, you know, and obviously we're not sure where that's coming from, and the refs kind of have to gauge that as it goes along. So those are the few rule changes right now. There are other ones that are going to be going into effect. We have a post obviously on 1500ESPN.com. You can search for that, but that's kind of the rundown that I got from refs recently.
One thing I do want to clarify, because this is something you and I were talking about yesterday, just kind of confused about, okay, what does this mean? How has it changed from the past? Is that contact at the line of scrimmage between defensive backs and wide receivers? My understanding is you'll still be able to redirect a wide receiver's route if you're a defensive back. How is that different than what they've done in the past? What's changing this
There's
year?
no rule change. What they call them is points of emphasis. So it's things that refs went back and watched film from last year and saw things that players were getting away with, and they felt this was one of them. Defensive backs being able to put their hands on receivers within that 5 yard mark, and then obviously beyond that 5 yard mark. So it's more so just holding and grabbing is what they're trying to look for. You can hand check within 5 yards, but once you get past that point, then you got to lay off a guy, and that's kind of what they're trying to emphasize. And the major thing that they're going to try and point out is the uniform grabbing. That's something that they really want to focus on, and just kind of defensive backs being able to tug a little bit at the back of a receiver's jersey. That's going to be an automatic foul right away every time.
And we asked Mike Zimmer about it during this training camp. What are you going to have to change for your defense, how you coach your defense? And he said, what do you mean? I'm not going to have to change anything. I coach within the rules.
Mike's been coaching in the NFL since 1994. There have been plenty of rule changes since then, so he's kind of the veteran, especially with Norv Turner too. Both of them been around forever. They're not too worried about having to adjust the year-to-year rules.
That's a quick rundown of some of the points of emphasis for the NFL and its referees this year. For Andrew Krammer, I'm Derek Wetmore. Thanks for coming to 1500ESPN.com.